Welcome to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. Earth-shattering news here in the state of Illinois, as yesterday Mike Madigan was indicted on 22 counts of both bribery and racketeering by the federal prosecutors in Chicago. So what does this mean for Illinois? Well, I'll tell you what I think it means. I think it means that 2022 could be the most consequential year in at least half a century for the state of Illinois. What will voters do in the wake of the corruption charges on the top Democrat in the state? Still the top Democrat in the state, in my opinion, J.B. Pritzker, just being a product of Mike Madigan's largesse. Let me put it succinctly to you. I'll tell you what 22 means. It is a chance to kick the go-along, get-along politicians on both sides of the aisle out of office. It's a chance to say goodbye to state legislators who doubled your gas taxes, let the governor shut down businesses with no interference from the legislative branch, who made your kids stare at a screen all day and called it school, who took billions in COVID money from the federal taxpayers and then said they balanced the budget, passed laws making streets a haven for criminals, and wasted truckloads of your money allowing unemployment fraud to persist. That is just a small list of the grievances just from within the last couple years that should inform voters this year. But I'll tell you what, this indictment should also be the start of ridding this state of the machine politicians who have fiscally and morally bankrupted this state. Let me be clear here. As it regards the Madigan indictment, it is an indictment of the entirety of the Democrat Party in Illinois, a party Madigan alone was allowed to control. Madigan did all the heavy lifting and made all the decisions. He ran the campaigns and his people fell right in line. Every important Democrat holding public office in Illinois right now is there because Mike Madigan put them there. That includes the entirety of the General Assembly and Governor J.B. Pritzker. Madigan raised the money from his crony union friends and rent-seeking corporations to fund the campaigns where they lied about their opponents on policy or both. Any member who crossed Mike Madigan or didn't vote for him was denied the engraved clock or presented with a primary opponent. Just ask Ken Duncan. His members enabled the corruption, and his reign only ended when federal prosecutors came knocking, not because of any courageous member in his caucus. While Mike Madigan is being prosecuted for corruption, he should also be prosecuted for Illinois earning the title of the worst-run state in the union. As of today, Illinois stands as a bad example of public policy after decades of politicians like Madigan lying to voters and voters keeping those politicians in office either because they have benefited from the crony deals or they were oblivious to it. Neither one is an excuse. Illinois is an outlier in every imaginable category. When Governor Pritzker takes credit for the state's credit rating moving up one notch, he fails to tell voters we will still have the worst credit rating in the nation, and no other state is even close. Illinois ranks in the bottom after decades of Madigan rule. We rank in the bottom of every list of key economic indicators like debt and job growth, even as we have the highest overall tax burden. And since politics is about people, the biggest indictment of the system that Madigan has ran for 50 years is the lie told by Democrats that they care about the little guy. It's Illinois' rank as one of the worst in the nation for providing services to persons with developmental and intellectual disabilities. Those families and nonprofits who provide for them have been lied to over and over again. So this is it year. This is the year, Illinoisans. This is the year that you can change the trajectory of the state. This is the year that you should wake up and vote for a conservative reformer. What are you going to do? Because the Democrats are, again, out there spinning this indictment as if something they had no part of, as something that they actually abhor, as something that they don't want to talk about. When you read from the Sun-Times, you can just read in between the lines here, and you better be savvy because you're going to be hit with a lot of political commercials. You've got J.B. Pritzker with an unlimited checkbook to send you soft, squishy YouTube videos saying how great he is and how much work he's done on behalf of the Illinoisans, but that is not true. You can't deny the loss of over 650,000 people in the last decade, where nearly $137 billion in cumulative AGI walked out of the state of Illinois and into other states. That is an indictment on the system, too. That's an indictment on the Democrats who kept Mike Madigan in power and refused to take this guy on. So what are they saying? Well, let's look at the Sun-Times says. Oh, let's see here. Oh, boy. Oh, yes. Oh, Governor J.B. Pritzker in Lightfoot reacted to the news minutes after it broke in the middle of the University of Illinois Chicago news conference at UIC, along with, they were there with Janet Yellen. And so what does Pritzker say? I've been saying for years now that we've got to root out corruption wherever it exists. And it's why we've passed and I've signed ethics reforms in the state of Illinois, said Pritzker. Okay, ethics reform, really? The same ethics reform bill that the Democrats slid through at the end of last year, the same ethics reform bill that had the legislative inspector general resign, saying that her job is a paper tiger because they did not do enough on ethics reform. Is that the bill, Governor Pritzker? Because you've done nothing to clean up ethics, and in fact, you've continued to lie about the voters. You told them flat out in your race for governor in 2018 that you were going to only sign independent maps, and instead you signed some of the most partisan maps ever to be drawn in the history of the United States. Just look at these squiggly lines, folks. He's not true. He's not being truthful about anything. He's as corrupt as they get. Then we can go on. Let's see what other people Democrats are saying about this. Well, first of all, let's listen. U.S. Attorney John Lausch says, better to have a tight case because if you're going to take a shot, you're not going to want to miss. He said this is the kind of case, if it's in fact true, of such incredible significance, somebody who has really shaped Illinois politics for 40 years, dominated almost every aspect of life from a political standpoint and from a legislative standpoint, the Logan Square Democrat said. That was Lightfoot. Okay, that was Lightfoot saying that. She's a former federal prosecutor. But she just declined to comment on the specifics of the allegations against Madigan, but said that U.S. Attorney John Lausch better have a tight case, and went on to say that, they need to make sure that it's tight because this guy's been involved in every deal for the last 40 years. So what do we have from Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch, the man who took the gavel from Madigan? He says the feds did their job. And they did the job that couldn't be handled by the investigative committee Welch chaired to look into the allegations against Madigan. That's right. It couldn't have been done by the legislators. It should have been done by Lisa Madigan. Where was she for all those years? Where was she when her father was doing his corrupt deals with ComEd back in 2011 as the allegations as what's been alleged in the indictment, in the charging documents, in the indictment? Where was she all that time? We don't know. Where's Kwame Warul? Where's he been since he was elected in 2018? Nobody knows. Okay, so let's see. What did Illinois Senate President Don Harmon say? Oh, these are obviously disturbing allegations. I have confidence in our system of justice. Like everyone else, I would be watching to see how this unfolds. That's it? That's all you can say? You're the beneficiary of Mike Madigan's largesse. You've watched him do his dirty deeds. You've been on the inside of these corrupt practices. There's no doubt in my mind you knew exactly what was going on. I don't doubt it for one bit. And you wouldn't take him on. Jim Durkin, today may be the darkest day in Illinois history. He says this 22-count federal indictment against former Democrat Speaker Mike Madigan is the beginning of the power cleaning so desperately needed in Illinois government. But this is not just an indictment against Mike Madigan. It's an indictment against the Democrat Party of Illinois that he ran for decades. I just gave you my opinion on that. I've been saying that for a while. State Senate Republican leader Dan McConkey says this underscores why it's so important to empower a statewide grand jury on corruption so we can finally begin to clean up our own house. I disagree on that. So we've got, this is what's going on. Okay, what did Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle? Because the Madigan's power extends not just to the State House. He was the leader of the Democrat Party for all those that time too. He set up everybody else that he wanted to help in politics, from Tony Preckwinkle to Lori Lightfoot to the alderman in Chicago. He had his hand in every single appointment. And I tell you what, if you did cross him, woe be you. Just ask Ken Duncan what happened when he decided to not show up for an important vote that Mike Madigan needed him to be there for. They had the barest of all supermajorities. They had exactly 71 people on there. There was a union bill that Rauner had vetoed that Mike Madigan wanted to shove it in Rauner's face. And so they called us back into session. I was there at the time. I think it was late August or early September. They called us back in session. They even had Esther Golar show up. She was literally on her deathbed. She came in from the hospital to vote. And then she died like just a couple weeks after that vote. They brought her down for this vote, but Ken Duncan refused to show up. He didn't want to take that vote. He didn't want to overturn the Governor Rauner's veto on that legislation. And so instead, what did Mike Madigan serve up to Ken Duncan, who represented a strip of Chicago? What did Mike Madigan do? Oh, well, he put up Juliana Stratton, who is currently our lieutenant governor, who is J.B. Pritzker's running mate. He put her up against Ken Duncan to take Ken Duncan out in a primary. And at that point, he had Barack Obama, a sitting Republican governor, a sitting president, cut a commercial on behalf of Juliana Stratton in a little state house race in the state of Illinois. That's what Mike Madigan did. He played hardball. There was $3 million spent in that race. On one side. That's what Mike Madigan does. So if you cross Mike Madigan, that's what you get. It's just remarkable. It's remarkable. And nobody knows anything now. Don Harmon, I have no idea what happened here. Right. I don't buy it. Don't buy it at all. So what Tony Parker's saying, our political organization should not double as a criminal enterprise. Really? No kidding. Well, you've seen this going on. You know, I sat on the transportation committee that dealt with the RTA and Metra and the other public transportation up in this area. And I recall the committee hearing where they were alleging that Mike Madigan was also trying to put cronies into particular positions on particular boards to make a salary. I recall that. Everybody does. Stories were written about that. Where was Toni Preckwinkle? She was there at that time. She was in charge. Crickets. Nothing. And in fact, there were members of her organization that were also brought up in that same sort of in that situation as well. She knows exactly what's going on. Can't believe this at all. Oh, here's Kelly Cassidy. Oh, gosh, one of the most, the worst Democrats down there. She goes, we knew our chamber, our state, our party deserved better leadership, and the unfolding corruption scandal would only continue to erode public confidence in our work. This is a sad day and a reminder of a terrible abuse of power that undermined our constituents' faith in government. Kelly Cassidy, you are one of the biggest beneficiaries of Mike Madigan's largesse. One of the biggest ones. There is no doubt that had you not also seen the writing on the wall and tried to just come to the defense at the last moment, the hashtag #MeToo defense of 300 women who signed a letter saying that there was sexual harassment going around in Springfield. I think all of them Democrat women, by the way, staffers, lobbyists, legislators, people who just worked in offices, bureaucrats. Yeah, that was your party that did that. And you pretended to stand up against Mike Madigan. And then not until the writing was on the wall and the ComEd scandal was starting to come to light did you guys actually do something to take Mike Madigan out and not vote for him for speaker. Shame on you. State Rep Ann Williams, who challenged Madigan for speaker, said in a statement that accountability and integrity should be at the foundation of public service. Unfortunately, this was lost in the pursuit of personal gain and political power. Collaboration and inclusion took a backseat to a culture of cronyism control. Again, she's somebody who's been there forever, at least a decade, probably a decade and a half. I know she was there when I first showed up in 2013. She's still there now. Nothing's changed. She knew what was going on. She allowed it to go on. Yeah, so there you go. The Democrat response is to pretend like they had nothing to do with about it. Don't believe them. Do not believe them. They've been a party to this for a long, long time. On my next segment of this podcast, we will have Kirk Allen. He is a co-founder of the Edgar County Watchdogs. He and his partner, John Kraft, have been fighting corruption around the state of Illinois since 2011. And he joins me to talk about the Mike Madigan indictment and who he thinks possibly are some of the unnamed individuals that have not been yet revealed that are in that indictment. So hold on and take a listen as I have this conversation with Kirk Allen. Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. With me on the phone is Kirk Allen. He is the co-founder of the Edgar County Watchdogs. They are a 501c3 organization who has been rooting out corruption across the state of Illinois for now, I think, 8 to 10 years. How long has it been, Kirk?
Well, we started in right at 2010. We incorporated in 2011, so we're beyond that 10-year mark now.
Oh boy! Well, they have been doing God's work in the state of Illinois, and it's all been based on corruption. It really has, and it's holding both parties accountable. And so now I have Kirk on my podcast today because he and I have actually fought together when it came to corruption, whether it's College of DuPage or Northern Illinois University or the Frank Martino issue. He's now our Auditor General. We've seen a lot of corruption in our time, and we always knew sort of where the head of that corruption came from. And yesterday it was a wake-up call, I believe, for the Democrats in the state of Illinois. I don't think that this is insignificant or something that is just going to be put on the back burner in this election year. I think this is actually pretty much a game changer in the state of Illinois, and that is the fact that Michael Madigan, longest-serving Speaker of the House in the entire United States, was indicted on 22 counts of bribery and racketeering charges by the federal prosecutors. And so now we have this new situation where we've known for a couple of years that he's been under investigation, where ComEd basically admitted that they had been bribing particular individuals without naming them specifically. We all suspected it was Mike Madigan, and now we know it was Mike Madigan. So where does this lead us? What happens now? Well, I tell you one thing I will say right up front. This is not just an indictment of Mike Madigan. It is an indictment of the entire Democrat Party that has allowed Mike Madigan to exist and to rule alone throughout his entire tenure. So the entire Democrat Party is indicted with this indictment of Mike Madigan, in my opinion. And so, Kirk, let's turn to you. You have read the report. I'm imagining you've read the indictment. Is that correct? Because you always do your homework.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you had some very interesting questions when we talked earlier. You kind of want to know who some of these other unnamed individuals are in the indictment, and you have your suspicions about who they might be. Are you willing? Could you share some of your thoughts about this Mike Madigan indictment and what you read in reading that entire document?
You bet. One thing I would like to point out, I have yet to hear it anywhere in the news media. It wasn't just Michael Madigan that was indicted.
That's right.
Michael F. McLean is also named on this indictment. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention, but his name popped up during the ComEd, the prior issue with the ComEd stuff, and he was, a former state rep and lobbyist tied at the hip with Madigan. So that I thought that was unique to see him named right there with Madigan in this case. The other one on page 23 of the indictment, under letter X, they go through and they list all these other people. They list Democratic organization. Individual 13W2 was associated with the Democrat organization. They don't say who that is, but the one that jumped out at me under X, individual FR-1 was a former member of and political ally of Madigan in the House of Representatives. I wonder if FR stands for Franks, as in, our Auditor General, Frank Martino. It could be Jack Franks, but FR, I got a gut feeling FR1 is Frank Martino, our Auditor General.
Well, perhaps
that's my suspicion. We'll find out as this goes forward.
Well, it is awfully suspicious considering what Frank Martino did and the misuse of his campaign account that was on full display for anybody with any ounce of common sense to understand. And the Edgar County Watchdogs, your organization, you and John were the first to really write about the Frank Martino misuse of his campaign account, to lay out the details about it, and to essentially make it public. You wrote story after story about Frank Martino's campaign account. You spent the time and effort to go through all the transactions and figure out that this guy had been scamming people for a long time. And yet he was elected he was appointed in a vote that only takes place in the House and the Senate by all the members of the General Assembly, except for 10 of us, except for 10. There were 10 of us who in 2016 refused to approve the appointment of Frank Martino as Auditor General because he was a longtime crony of Mike Madigan, because we didn't trust him to have the skill set and the ethics to to be the top financial watchdog, and yet he got away with a lot. Why don't you close the loop here? Tell people what Frank Martino did, how he was not prosecuted, and how it perhaps, and we are speculating here, we're going to admit it, perhaps part of the reason he was not harshly prosecuted is that he was maybe turning evidence against Mike Madigan. Can you explain it in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, the biggest thing with Martino was he was using campaign money for all kinds of personal expenditures. He showed entries, for loan payments to a bank, but heck, you go back and look at how many loans he got from the bank, the numbers didn't add up. The local bank had become a one-stop shop for everything in his campaign. One local gas station, getting $250,000 over 10 years. I mean, there were so many red flags, it was unbelievable. And even after he went through the State Board of Elections in the hearing on the complaint, pled the fifth, refused to turn over documents, the Supreme Court validates everything we wrote about, and they found that he violated the law. Nothing has ever happened to him, and it was so cut and dry, we couldn't believe that he's never been prosecuted. So you have to speculate or ask why. Why hasn't he been charged? Why was this whitewashed? And the only logical solution I can come up with is he is cooperating with the federal authorities, because he did acknowledge he was cooperating with the feds early on. Mm-hmm. The only thing I can come up with is he's cooperated on the pursuit of Mike Madigan. And, one of the whole issues in here in this complaint talks about these people, whoever FR1 is, it's a former state rep. How many former state reps do we have that are tied to this? We've identified 2, suspected people in this, but they don't name them. But I'd venture to bet that he bought his freedom by providing information that he had on Mike Madigan. And you're right, it's speculation. We absolutely insist. This strictly is our opinion. It's speculation. We're putting puzzle pieces together, and right now this jigsaw puzzle seems to fit pretty good, but time will tell.
Yes. And did you have any other suspicions about other unnamed individuals in that indictment?
Well, Jack Franks had been, I guess his office was raided, or Madigan's office was raided in relation to a Jack Franks criminal investigation for some sexual misconduct. And that all kind of got whitewashed, and we never heard anything about it. Nobody, has ever been indicted. There's been no charges. And we all know that Jack Franks, as a former state rep, was tied at the hip with Madigan. So we've always wondered, was that the other party? Because one of the things found on page 89 of this 106-page indictment, under subheading D, Representative A and Representative B were elected members of the House of Representatives. Huh. I can't wait to find out who A and B are.
Well, it is remarkable. They've had quite a record here, the Democrats, getting indicted on corruption charges, from Alderman Burke to the latest being State Senator Tom Cullerton. And now we have Mike Madigan. I mean, the last 4 years have just been one indictment after the other with these folks, and there appears to be still more to come of people in positions of power making decisions on other folks in this state absolutely being to their core corrupt. Now, I will say this. I don't know that Tom Cullerton, for example, went down to Springfield to find some sort of ghost payrolling job. But that's exactly what happened, because he fell in with the culture down there. They have a culture of this corruption. They have a culture of watching Madigan, which is really what he's accused of in this indictment. He's accused of having ComEd secure ghost payrolling jobs for people, his cronies that lived in his district and did his political work. That's what he is accused of. And in return, they pass a very lucrative Exelon bailout bill in December of 2016. They passed another favorable ComEd legislation in 2011. So he's doing favors for people, and on the background, he's getting political favors back. So I don't know that people like Tom Cullerton, who probably didn't go down there to play that game. I think they just got caught up in that game, and this is what happens.
Well, it's
I think
quite
that's what we
possible.
see.
It's definitely a culture. Unfortunately, it's a culture in the entire state of Illinois. I mean, I could go on for hours of the number of ghost payrolls or political paybacks, the quid pro quo that goes on. And we've got state's attorneys that refuse to prosecute public corruption.
Which is the root of the problem. Do you have any recent cases that you would like to just, bring up at this point? What's something maybe more on the local level that you can set out as an example for our listeners of the type of corruption you can find just simply in your backyard?
Yeah, right here in Shelby County, just an hour west of us. In fact, Channel 17, Decatur News, WAND, just ran a big story that we helped them on. They had a county highway engineer that for 22 years ran his private engineering business out of the county facility. He was also the engineer for the city of Shelbyville. So this guy is literally with two public, payrolls running his private business out of a county office, which is a crime. You can't do that. It violates our Constitution. Use of public property is only for public purpose. And to this day, he's never been charged. He has basically gotten away with it. And we had board members that acknowledge, he's been doing that for years. What's the problem? Well, the problem is it competes with any other engineering firm. He has no overhead. The overhead was covered by the cost of the taxpayers. And the state's attorney won't prosecute him. And I mean, it's mind-boggling, the stuff that goes on.
Okay, so basically what's happened here is the same thing you've seen with Madigan. People know what's going on, and they just don't do anything about it.
They absolutely know what's going on. Absolutely. They can't hide this.
No. It's remarkable, though. So the state's
the
attorney refuses to prosecute him, or are they going to prosecute him now? Finally, because public attention from regular media popped up on this.
Well, we do know, thanks to some good, solid people, the feds have been looking into it. But everything we've looked at, I don't see how the feds will be able to prosecute because it's not federal money. It's not tied to federal money.
Yes.
So that's one of the criteria. But we'll default back to something that we find all over the state with our sheriffs. We have sheriffs that seize weapons from the bad guys, and they put them in jail, and then the sheriff goes out and sells the very weapons he just seized. And that's a crime in Illinois. Well, Shelby County. That sheriff was investigated by the state police. It was turned over for a charging decision by Kwame Raoul in December of last year. December of 2020. Here we are, 2022. Over a year, roughly 14 months has gone by, and no charging decision yet. And we nailed that one out of the park, and that's one of a half a dozen sheriffs we've caught doing that. None of them ever get prosecuted.
Well, and so it goes beyond just ancillary people who are working in these same offices, who are state legislators under Mike Madigan and know the deal, and are told essentially how to vote and what legislation to kill. In fact, my first bill that I took to Jack Franks was a transparency bill, and Jack looked at me in the eyes and said, "Well, I was told to kill your bill, but because I like you, I'll at least give you a hearing." I mean, this is their attitude down there, right? But yet all these people know what the game being played. They play the game along with them. And then you have people in highly elected offices like Kwame Raoul, who should be looking out for taxpayers and citizens and taking on public corruption, and they refuse to do it. Just like, Lisa Madigan, who sat in office for 16 years while her husband her father was the most powerful speaker in the entire United States. And she couldn't find 1 ounce of public corruption. And now all of a sudden, the feds are in there finding out that since 2011, they've been doing this hanky-panky with each other, ComEd and Mike McLean and Mike Madigan and, public official A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you elect the wrong people, this is what you get, whether it's your local state's attorney or your attorney general or your lowly state rep.
That old saying that all politics are local holds true and fast, because your local state's attorneys are not going to upset their local political power base. They are not going to go after one of their own. Mm-hmm. And as long as we have, the system of prosecution in this state like we do, we're not going to get anywhere. We have to have outside prosecutors that can come in where they don't have any political connections. There's none of this, favoritism that goes on at the local level. Bring in an outside prosecutor and get it done. All of our corruption in Illinois, the only cleanup we've ever seen comes from the federal government. It has to come from outside. And until we can do that locally, man, we're at the mercy of the feds to come in and fix any of this stuff.
Well, the Republicans are trying to grandstand right now down in Springfield, and honestly, some of these Republicans just played along with electing Martino. And they had no problem with that, voting for the ComEd bailout bill. They had no problem voting for that. They have no problem voting with Democrats on tax hikes. But now they're grandstanding, saying we need our own investigation grand jury where we can actually investigate things like this. I mean, I have no confidence in a state legislative grand jury committee. No, I have no confidence that they could do it. I just think that's a total, they just would never do it.
No, that's definitely not going to be the fix to this problem. And it's unfortunate, depending on where we go in the state and who we're exposing, mm-hmm. we get blamed, you're here because of the Democrats, or you're here because of the Republicans. We get attacked by both sides. The corruption we're finding is the same everywhere. It doesn't matter what party they are. We've got these people in both parties doing it. They do as they feel fit. And by gosh, if you raise, a concern, it's kill the messenger. They never want to hear the message. It's just attack the messenger.
Well, this is, you've been, again, in this business for a while, doing the hard work. First of all, tell people what your record is. How many public officials have you forced out of office, and how many indictments have you seen from your work?
Well, off the top of my head, I think we had a couple more last week in a little community of Windsor that resigned. I believe we're right at 490, 489, 490, so just below 500 officials. We've got about 180 some indictments across the state over this time. And I think pretty much, other than those that are still pending trial, all of them ended up being convicted with a couple of exceptions. And I'm going to make this as a prediction. Lincoln Way School District 210, Lawrence Wiley has yet to face trial. And it's because he's unable to provide assistance to his own defense. It's a medical claim. Okay, I'm assuming he has, something medically like dementia or Alzheimer's that he's not able to assist in his defense, so he still has not gone to trial. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens with Mike Madigan. Will he ever go to trial? Or will he find a doctor? Will he find a doctor somewhere to identify that he's got, some mental issues that he's unable to assist in his defense? And that will postpone any trial until he can assist. That's what Lawrence Wiley did. And Lawrence Wiley still draws $325,000+ a year in retirement benefits, all while waiting on a 6 felony count indictment, and he'll never face trial.
That is just sick. And Mike Madigan at age 79, who also is drawing a significant pension, it's got to be upwards of over $100,000 a year. He's slated to, I think, go in front of the judge on March 9th. For his initial hearing on this case, on this indictment. There's no doubt that he'll get out on bond, and he will probably going to lawyer up to the hilt. And I have no doubt that you're right in that prediction. We may never see him go to jail.
Well, I hope I'm wrong. Well, there's a difference between seeing him go to jail and seeing him actually prosecuted. I don't believe he'll get prosecuted because there'll be some argument he's unable to assist in his defense because of some mental, incapacity. And I pray I'm wrong. I really do. But after watching what Lawrence Wiley did, I mean, that's a simple out. Hey,
Lawrence Wiley, who's a disgrace to his veteran status, by the way. Total disgrace to his veteran status. Yep.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. You always speak truth to power, and we appreciate your efforts and are there to support you. If people want to connect with you, they can email you at your website, right? EdgarCountyWatchdogs.com or is .org?
Yes, ma'am. It's .com. EdgarCountyWatchdogs.com.
Right. You can make a financial contribution to these men doing really great work in the state of Illinois. And actually, they also have another 501c3 called American Watchdogs, where they are starting to do other work in other states. So we appreciate their efforts. They're terrific patriots. And thank you again for being on The Real Story with Jeanne Ives.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Jeannie. You guys have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.